In the heart of Doha, the Grand Hall gleamed with a golden hue, as if to mark the historic moment that was about to unfold. This was no ordinary meeting. It was a moment that would echo through history. The world's gaze was fixed on the intersection of two powerful worlds, one led by the bold and unyielding leader, Ibrahim Traoré, from the African heartlands, the other, the rich and influential realm of the Gulf, personified by Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad al-Thani, the Amir of Qatar. What was about to take place here wasn't merely a diplomatic exchange. It was the collision of ideologies, histories, and visions, each grounded in a deeply rooted understanding of Islam, justice, and power. The cameras clicked furiously as Traoré, wearing his humble yet resolute African attire, walked into the hall. At the other end, Sheikh Tamim stood to greet him, extending a hand with a warm smile that held centuries of tradition and authority. This handshake? It was more than a greeting. It was the birth of a new narrative, one that promised to challenge boundaries and redefine leadership. The world was watching, and so were you. Don't miss the chance to witness a conversation that will not only break barriers, but set the stage for a new chapter in global discourse. Stay tuned, subscribe, and be part of this history-making moment. The dialogue starts now. The atmosphere inside the Grand Hall in Doha was electric with anticipation. Dignitaries, scholars, and thinkers from across the Muslim world gathered in silence, their eyes fixed on the two figures at the center of the room. For many, this meeting was not just another political exchange. It was a rare opportunity to witness history unfold. It was a meeting that spoke to more than just diplomatic ties. It spoke to a deeper, more profound connection between Africa and the Middle East, between two worlds that had long been divided by both geography and history. As the clock ticked down to the appointed hour, the hall seemed to pulse with a collective breath held in expectation. And then, the doors opened. Ibrahim Traoré stepped into the room, a quiet yet undeniable presence. Dressed in traditional African attire, he embodied the values of his people: humility, resilience, and authenticity. His simple clothing contrasted with the polished robes of the Gulf elites around him, but there was a quiet power in the way he carried himself. Traoré was not just a leader of his people, he was the embodiment of their dreams, struggles, and aspirations. Across from him stood Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad al-Thani, the Amir of Qatar. His regal presence filled the room as he rose with a warm yet reserved smile, extending his hand to Ibrahim. This handshake, though simple, was laden with significance, a bridge between two worlds, two ideologies, and two experiences of Islam. The moment they sat down, the weight of the world seemed to fall upon their shoulders. The quiet murmur of the crowd hushed as Sheikh Tamim, with a voice that was calm but commanding, addressed Ibrahim. "You have captured the attention of not only Africa, but the Muslim world," he began. "Many of us in the Middle East admire your defiance against neo-colonialism. But I must ask, how do you perceive Islam in Africa today?" Ibrahim Traoré paused. His eyes, filled with wisdom and resolve, met the Amir's. The question was sharp, probing, but it was also an invitation. It was an invitation to speak honestly, to delve into a subject that had long been ignored or misunderstood. "Your Highness," Ibrahim began, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Islam in Africa has always been more than just rituals. It is a faith that has walked with us through centuries of struggle. It has been both a shield and, at times, a chain." He spoke of his people's deep-rooted connection to the faith, their resilience in the face of colonization, and how, over time, that connection had been distorted by both external forces and extremists. The Amir listened intently, his expression one of quiet empathy, as Ibrahim continued. In my country, Islam is rooted in the soil, in the prayers of our farmers, in the devotion of our mothers, and in the resistance of our people. But I must confess, we are also burdened by distortions. Colonial powers once used our faith to divide us, and now, extremists use it to fuel violence. I want Islam in Africa to be a source of liberation, not division. The Amir's eyes glistened with understanding. He knew the weight of what Ibrahim was saying. It was not just a critique of Africa's past. It was a call to reawaken the true spirit of Islam, a spirit that had been hijacked by those in power. As the room remained silent, the Amir leaned forward, his voice soft but resolute. Ibrahim, let me tell you something about Islam that many forget, he said. Islam was never meant to be a tool for kings or politicians. It was meant to be a light for those seeking truth. The words hung in the air, and the room seemed to hold its breath. What would Ibrahim say next? How would this conversation unfold? The dialogue between these two powerful men had just begun, and it was clear that the path ahead would be one of deep reflection, challenge, and transformation. The exchange between Ibrahim Traoré and Sheikh Tamim began to deepen. The room, which had been filled with an air of formality, now seemed to pulse with the energy of a true conversation, one of honesty, understanding, and shared vision. The Amir, his eyes still fixed on Ibrahim, leaned in slightly. You see, Ibrahim, he began, people often think that Islam is about rituals, prayers, dress codes, fasting. Yes, these are important. But what is Islam without justice? What is prayer if the poor sleep hungry? What is fasting if corruption eats the soul of society? Ibrahim listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of truth. The Amir's words echoed in his mind. He thought about the struggles his people faced, the famine, the corruption, the oppression. These were not just political issues. They were spiritual crises, ones that the true message of Islam was meant to address. He had seen the way the faith had been twisted by political leaders, exploited by those in power to maintain control. But here, in this room, the Amir was speaking of Islam in its purest form, the Islam that had been revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I agree with you, Your Highness, Ibrahim said, his voice firm. When we see children dying of hunger while billion-dollar corporations extract our resources, we wonder, where is justice? When we see foreign armies camped on our soil in the name of security, but in reality fueling division, we ask, where is Islam in all this? The Amir's face softened as he nodded. Exactly. Islam, at its core, is about justice. But too many today forget that. Too many have forgotten that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did not come to establish kingdoms or empires. He came to bring justice, to uplift the oppressed, to protect the weak. If Islam today is used as a tool for oppression, then it is no longer the Islam of Muhammad. It is the Islam of those seeking power. As the Amir spoke, a silence enveloped the room. His words were like a sword, cutting through the illusions that had clouded the faith for centuries. Ibrahim, deeply moved by the Amir's conviction, nodded slowly. He understood now. Islam was not meant to serve kings or politicians. It was meant to serve the people. It was a faith of liberation, not oppression. The Amir's voice was calm, yet filled with the weight of centuries of scholarship as he continued. Islam is not about the rules, the halal and haram, the dress codes, or the rituals. These things matter, of course, but what is Islam if it is not about justice? What is prayer if it is not accompanied by action to alleviate the suffering of the poor? What is fasting if it does not lead to a society free from corruption? Ibrahim sat up straighter, absorbing the gravity of the Amir's words. He thought back to his own struggles in Burkina Faso, where corruption and injustice were rampant. He had witnessed leaders who claimed to be pious, who quoted the Quran and led prayers in the mosque, yet they were the same ones exploiting the poor, enriching themselves at the expense of the people. "I have seen it, Your Highness," Ibrahim said. "I have seen leaders who claim to be followers of Islam, but their actions betray the very principles of the faith. They pray in mosques but exploit the poor. They quote the Quran but enslave their people. It is a shadow of the Islam I believe in." The Amir paused, his gaze unwavering. "You are right, Ibrahim. What you are describing is not Islam. It is a perversion of Islam. Islam is not about rules. It is about justice, mercy, and compassion. If we forget these core principles, then we have forgotten the essence of our faith." The room was still, every person hanging on the words of these two leaders. Ibrahim's heart felt lighter as the Amir's wisdom resonated deeply within him. For the first time in years, he felt the possibility of true change, not just in Africa, but in the Muslim world as a whole. But the Amir wasn't finished. He leaned closer, his voice soft but firm, as if sharing a sacred truth. "You see, Ibrahim, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did not come with palaces or armies. He came with a message that empowered the weak and condemned the powerful. He did not conquer with swords, but with truth, with justice, with a commitment to the well-being of all people, regardless of their background or status." Ibrahim's eyes widened, and for a moment he was transported back to the earliest days of Islam, the days of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when faith was about the liberation of the soul and the protection of the vulnerable, not about political gain or the pursuit of power. The Amir's words hung in the air, as if challenging Ibrahim, and indeed, all those listening, to reconsider everything they thought they knew about Islam. Could this be the true Islam? The Islam of justice, compassion, and unity? Would Africa, under leaders like Ibrahim, embrace this vision of Islam? And if so, what would the consequences be for the world? The conversation had already reached a profound depth, but now it was about to take an even more transformative turn. Ibrahim Traoré, reflecting on the Amir's words, could feel something stirring deep inside him, a realization that the path forward for both Africa and the Muslim world might be rooted in these very teachings of Islam. His heart, once burdened by the weight of corruption, division, and oppression, now felt a flicker of hope. The Amir, sensing the shift in the room, spoke again, his voice steady, but filled with an intensity that captured everyone's attention. "Islam is not Arab. It is not African. It is not Asian. It is universal," he declared, his words reverberating through the hall. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not sent for one tribe, one race, or one people. He was sent for all of humanity. If Arabs claim ownership of Islam, they are wrong. And if Africans think they are only recipients of this faith, they are mistaken. Africa has been the cradle of Islam since the earliest days. Ibrahim's eyes widened in recognition. He had never heard it put this way before. The Amir was speaking of a shared history, a history that was often forgotten in the modern political landscape. The first followers of Islam, the early Muslims, had fled persecution in Mecca and sought refuge in Africa, in the Christian kingdom of Aksum, where they were welcomed and protected. Islam had found its roots in Africa long before it spread to the Arabian Peninsula, but this history was not often told. Shared vision. The Amir continued, his voice rising with conviction. Do not let anyone tell you that Africa is secondary in Islam. Africa is not the periphery of the faith. It is central to its survival. The survival of Islam began with Africa. Ibrahim, who had always carried the weight of his continent's history on his shoulders, now felt a fire ignite within him. For so long, he had fought to ensure Africa's voice was heard on the global stage, to remind the world that Africa was not just a land of suffering and poverty, but a land of strength, history, and dignity. The Amir's words were like a beacon, guiding him toward a future where Africa could stand tall, not as subservient followers, but as equal bearers of the truth of Islam. This is what Africa must hear, Ibrahim declared, his voice resonating with a newfound passion. We are not beggars at the table of Islam. We are inheritors of a trust, guardians of a light that was shared with us from the earliest days, and yet many still treat us as outsiders, as if Islam belongs elsewhere. The Amir smiled faintly, his eyes gleaming with pride. Yes, Ibrahim, that is why Islam has often been politicized. But I tell you now, Islam belongs wherever justice reigns. And if Africa rises with justice, then Africa is Islam's heart. Public reaction. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Many of the clerics, scholars, and dignitaries present, who had been listening quietly up until this point, nodded in agreement, their faces alight with recognition. For some, this was a long-forgotten truth, one that had been buried under centuries of colonial oppression and exploitation. But now, it was being brought to the surface by two leaders who had the courage to speak it aloud. Ibrahim felt the weight of the room's collective gaze. He had long known that Africa's potential was being stifled, but now he understood that the key to unlocking Africa's future lay in a deeper understanding of Islam, an Islam that was not defined by politics, division, or violence, but by justice, mercy, and unity. As he glanced around the room, he could see the shift in the expressions of the people present. The ideas being discussed were not abstract concepts. They were powerful truths that had the potential to change the course of history. But even as the room buzzed with excitement, Ibrahim's mind raced with a deeper question. If Islam, in its truest form, was about justice and unity, then why did so many Muslim nations continue to fight among themselves? Why were there still divisions, Sunni against Shia, Arab against African, and Muslims turning against each other while claiming to follow the same faith? The Amir, sensing Ibrahim's internal struggle, leaned forward and spoke softly. You are right to ask, Ibrahim. The divisions we see among Muslims today are not from Islam. They are from our egos, our greed, our failure to put Allah above everything else. Ibrahim leaned back in his chair, contemplating these words. The Amir had just placed his finger on the heart of the problem. It wasn't Islam that was divided. It was the people who had abandoned the true principles of Islam. As the conversation between Ibrahim Traoré and Sheikh Tamim continued, the significance of their words began to ripple far beyond the walls of the Grand Hall in Doha. The world's media, ever watchful of such high-profile meetings, would soon catch wind of the groundbreaking exchange. For many, the discussion between these two leaders wasn't just about Islam or Africa. It was a reminder of the deep spiritual roots of the Muslim faith and how, when applied correctly, Islam could be a source of justice, equality, and peace. In the West, where Islam was often misrepresented or associated with extremism, the media's coverage of this conversation could challenge entrenched stereotypes. The dialogue was refreshing, offering a counter-narrative to the prevailing image of Islam as a religion of violence and division. Ibrahim and Sheikh Tamim had turned the lens inward, focusing on the essential message of Islam. justice for the oppressed, unity for the divided, and peace for the world. For those who had followed Ibrahim Traoré's rise to power, this was an important moment. His leadership had been defined by his refusal to bow to colonial interests and his fierce commitment to his people's dignity. Now, under the guidance of the Amir, Traoré's vision seemed to be growing even clearer. He was not just a political leader. He was becoming a voice for a new generation of African Muslims who longed for a faith that could empower them, not enslave them. Media outlets across the globe would soon headline the conversation as a major moment of change. In the Arab world, commentators began to reflect on the Amir's words about Islam's universality. How often had the Muslim world been divided by tribalism, nationalism, or political interests? The Amir's challenge to reframe the narrative about Islam was not just important, it was urgent. In Africa, the conversation quickly became a rallying cry. Ibrahim Traoré's words, inspired by his meeting with Sheikh Tamim, resonated with the African people, who had long felt marginalized in the global conversation about Islam. The Western media, on the other hand, struggled to digest the depth of what was being said. Was it possible that a conversation between two Muslim leaders could redefine how the world viewed the Islamic faith? Was this a challenge to the narrative they had long pushed, one that often focused on extremism, terrorism, and violence? For the first time in years, they had to reckon with the reality that Islam, in its true form, was a force for good, a force that fought for justice, dignity, and humanity. This meeting held the potential to spark a profound shift in how both the Muslim world and the wider global community viewed Africa's role in Islam. For too long, Africa had been treated as a mere recipient of Islam, a place where the faith was practiced but not truly understood or appreciated. But now, with the words of Sheikh Tamim and Ibrahim Traoré echoing in the air, Africa was asserting its place as a cradle of Islam, a place where the true spirit of the faith could take root and flourish. This conversation also had the potential to reshape the political landscape. Leaders in the West and in the Middle East would have to rethink their strategies when it came to engaging with Africa. No longer could Africa be dismissed as a poor, war-torn continent with little to offer in the global discourse on religion and politics. Now, with leaders like Ibrahim Traoré speaking up, Africa was positioning itself as a central player in the global Muslim community. But as these discussions were taking place in the halls of power, Ibrahim Traoré knew that the path ahead would not be easy. He had already made powerful enemies, and those who sought to maintain the status quo would not sit idly by. The question remained, could this conversation be the spark for a global movement, one that would transcend borders, challenge old power structures, and bring about true justice for the oppressed? As Ibrahim sat in the quiet of the room, reflecting on the Amir's words, he knew the battle for Islam's true message, justice, dignity, and unity, had only just begun. Would the world be ready to embrace this new vision? As the conversation between Ibrahim Traoré and Sheikh Tamim drew to a close, the weight of their words lingered in the air, heavy with the responsibility of what had been shared. It was clear that this exchange was not meant to remain confined to the four walls of the Grand Hall in Doha. No, it was the beginning of something much larger, something that could resonate far beyond politics and diplomacy. It was a call to action, a challenge to those who had heard it, to live the principles of justice, unity, and truth that had been discussed. Ibrahim knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also understood that change rarely comes without resistance. He thought about the millions of people across Africa, the young Muslims who were looking for something more than just a religion. They were searching for a way to make their faith a source of empowerment, and liberation. The path forward for Africa was not just about reclaiming its political power. It was about reclaiming its spiritual heritage, the true message of Islam that had been buried under layers of exploitation and corruption. The actionable steps, Ibrahim believed, were simple but profound. First, he would need to work within his own country, Burkina Faso, to lead by example. He would need to show his people that Islam was not a religion of violence or division, but one that could be a source of justice, peace, and dignity. Second, he would need to collaborate with other African leaders to build a network of unity and solidarity. An Africa that stood strong, not as a collection of fragmented nations, but as a united force in the global arena. And finally, he would need to work with the Muslim world, particularly in the Middle East, to forge stronger ties based on mutual respect and understanding. The conversation between Ibrahim and the Amir had not only been about political leaders and power structures, it had been about the role of every individual in creating a more just and unified world. Ibrahim knew that to truly bring about change, it would take more than just the actions of a few leaders. It would require the collective will of the people. Every Muslim, every African, and indeed, every human being had a part to play in this vision. He thought about the farmers, the mothers, the young people who prayed for a better future. He thought about the millions who had been denied justice, the people who had been silenced by corruption and oppression. Ibrahim's heart swelled with determination. It was not just about politics or religion. It was about creating a world where the principles of Islam were truly lived. A world where the weak were protected, the poor were cared for, and justice prevailed. Every individual has the power to make a difference, Ibrahim said, as if speaking directly to the people who would one day hear his words. It's not enough to wait for a leader to act. We must all stand for justice, we must all work for peace, and we must all strive to make the world a better place, one action at a time. As the conversation came to a close, Ibrahim's resolve had only grown stronger. He was now more certain than ever that the path forward lay in the hands of the people. The message was clear. Africa could rise, not by bowing to the West, not by selling its soul for wealth, but by standing firm in the truth of Islam. And this was a message that transcended borders, transcended political allegiances, and spoke directly to the heart of every Muslim, every African, and every person who believed in justice. I will carry this message forward, Ibrahim vowed, his voice resolute. I will tell my people that Islam is not a tool of division. It is a source of liberation. It is a call for justice, for dignity, and for unity. And I will tell the world that Africa is ready to embrace this message fully, not as followers, but as equal bearers of the truth. With these final words, Ibrahim Traoré's mission was clear. But as he prepared to return to Burkina Faso and share this message with the world, he knew that the fight for justice would not be easy. The forces of division, corruption, and power would not let go without a struggle. Would Ibrahim's vision resonate with the people of Africa? Would the world listen to the call for a more just and unified Muslim world? The next chapter was about to unfold, and Ibrahim's journey had just begun. The meeting between Ibrahim Traoré and Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad al-Thani was not just a conversation. It was a revelation. In the quiet, golden-lit hall of Doha, two leaders from different corners of the world shared an exchange that transcended politics, borders, and ideologies. They spoke of the true essence of Islam: justice, unity, and dignity, principles that had been buried beneath the weight of corruption, colonialism, and extremism for far too long. For Ibrahim Traoré, The words of Sheikh Tamim were a clarion call to action. Islam, as he had come to understand, was never meant to serve kings or politicians. It was meant to serve the people, to protect the weak, to empower the oppressed, and to bring about a world where justice reigned supreme. For Africa, this conversation was a reminder of the continent's crucial role in the history of Islam. Africa was not just a passive recipient of the faith, but a cradle of Islam, a place where the true spirit of the religion had once flourished, and could once again. As the world continues to grapple with issues of division and injustice, Ibrahim's vision offers hope. His belief in a united Africa, led by the true principles of Islam, is a vision that can inspire not just Africans, but people across the globe. Islam, in its truest form, is not about division. It is about peace, justice, and mercy. It is a faith that calls for unity, for the protection of the weak, and for the establishment of a just society. Ibrahim Traoré has taken on a monumental task: to remind his people and the world of the true meaning of Islam. His journey is far from over, and while the road ahead may be fraught with challenges, the message he carries is one that can change the world. It is a message of hope, of unity, and of the unyielding belief that justice will ultimately prevail. As we reflect on this powerful conversation, we must ask ourselves, how can we embody the true principles of Islam in our own lives? How can we fight for justice, not just for ourselves, but for those who are most vulnerable? The task is not just for leaders like Ibrahim, but for all of us. If you believe in the message of justice, dignity, and unity that Ibrahim Traoré and Sheikh Tamim have shared, then please subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories and discussions that challenge the status quo. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know how we can work together to make a difference.